was ever made to stand in a big amphitheater in front of 500 scientists from all over the world and actually give a talk. So unless you've done a couple of these things before, you can't really now go and sit in a boardroom full of directors of your company and then give the same talk. So this is where my PhD in particular helped me.
I would like to now focus on your industry career, since we've reached that point regarding your PhD. And you mentioned this lovely thing of creating knowledge, that is one of the hallmarks of science. So being a person who is so in love with science and so in love with creating knowledge, and I have to agree that that is one of the purest and most humane aspects of science, why did you pursue a career outside academia? So what drove you to make this shift into industry?
Well, that's a tricky question. So first of all, industry and academia give two different types of job satisfaction. And not to get me wrong, I'm not talking about salary.
Mm-hmm.
So what I was always, and I'm going to be completely honest now, what I was completely sick of was that I was always a kid, a junior, even when it was a postdoc, it was like, oh, that kid, he's not really anyone, unless you're a big professor and head of chair, you're pretty much no one. And that got on my nerves. No one takes you for serious, and you constantly have to prove you constantly have to maybe that's the particularity of the system where I was embedded, but I wanted to get free of this stuck way of thinking that unless you're a senior PI or a head of a chair, you're basically nothing. In industry, as soon as you get in, you get real responsibilities, and you have accountabilities, and someone really counts on you and says, that guy needs to deliver this and that. And if you do, great job, you're getting pushed up. If you don't, bad job, you're getting pushed down. But at least it's a merit-based system. That's one thing. And I did feel nicer in industry in a sense that I didn't have to, there was less of this kind of interlab politics, and at least in our company. And on the other side, I did immediately get more responsibilities, and people respected me for delivering data. Whereas, maybe it's this cynicism and pessimism of science, of academics. Every time you produce good data in a lab, people are like, not good enough. You always have a reviewer that says not good enough. It always can be. And after more than, 10 years of working with this, said, it brings me down a bit. So I wanted, even if I produce the best data possible, a reviewer would come and say, that's not good enough, you need to do more. And I was a bit sick. Secondly, the academic way of publishing and career progression is a very swampy thing. We put numbers on papers, we put impact factors on stuff. Peer review conceptually is an amazing thing, but I think editors today, up to a certain degree, have lost the control around this system. There is a lot of stuff happening during the peer review that I didn't like. Also, there is a lot of unequal footing, I would say, if you're starting your career in a smaller lab versus a bigger lab. Big labs generally publish in bigger journals, maybe even stories that are not so cool, simply because they're big. So I got tired from this. I got tired from this rat race of impact factor publishing. And I wanted to see something else. And I'm being completely honest now. So I love, you know, to go back to your question, I love science, but I don't like academia. So these are two different things. I love the concept of making new knowledge, but not the current way how it's set up. So I decided I want to try something else, and I am still doing science. I am a so I'm a scientist in a company, and my job currently doesn't really differ to what I've been doing so far, because I was very lucky to still land like a proper drug discovery well, not a target discovery, drug discovery, but like an actual research position, where I still get to do everything I did on my postdoc, develop hypotheses, push things, do proper science. So I'm not kind of in manufacturing or quality analytics or something. So far I don't see any difference between the job I've been doing before and now.
Quick digression, if I may interrupt you just for a second. You mentioned the publishing process for within academia. We forgot to cover, I assume that companies prefer if you publish during your PhD, that lends you a much better position. No.
So I have to say, usually what companies are, look, when you're applying for jobs, companies don't get, look, I worked in a big institute. I've seen people push out science papers after having worked 6 months on them, meaning, you know, the story was developed by a postdoc.
How?
The story was already developed by a postdoc. Someone, like the guy left, someone came, wrapped up a couple of experiments, pushed out like a first authorship paper. Companies know this, and everyone knows this. You know, like you can come with 3 science papers and actually still not be capable of doing them on your own. The point is,
what would you say that a good PhD for the position is? You mentioned that you highlighted this very much. You need a good PhD for this.
yes. So what I wanted to say is, you need someone who will really not hold your hand, who will not do the job for you, who will not tell you do this and do that, or basically you don't want or don't need a micromanager. You need someone who will say, hey, this is the problem now, let's plunge feet first and or how do you call it, head first, and let's try to find the problem. And that's basically what also industry does. You know, we have a problem, let's try to solve it. And no one here will hold your hand. And that's exactly the point. They hired you to solve the problem, not, they didn't hire you to hold your hand. So if during your PhD you have been pampered by facilities or by your PI constantly telling you what to do, it's kind of pointless PhD. At least that's how I see it. So what you need in these couple of years of your life is to develop this critical thinking, data-driven analytics, data-driven decision making. And what companies want when they basically, when you go to an application, they want to see someone who is object-oriented, who knows how to control time and resources, and who knows how to basically deliver data and results. They usually ask for a paper just as a proof that you have indeed driven a project somewhere and you have done something, but not to gauge the impact factor. So if you basically go on and say, hey guys, this is my paper and I've done everything and it's been published in, I don't know, scientific reports, it's still better than having a science paper where you basically just finished a couple of blots. So they don't really need a paper for this impact factor type of a thing, but they rather need they need
proof of concept, basically, that you're, yeah.
Yes. So there is this kind of myth about academics that they're basically scattered brained and they can't really deliver because we just like to pursue weird questions, which I don't think it's true. especially maybe in modern sciences, because you are driven by funding and your positions to be very goal oriented. But the point is, there is this stigma of an academic as someone just, doing weird stuff and I don't know, counting the hairs on flies for some reason. And industry doesn't want this. So they basically need people who will come in, look at the problem, start solving the problem with, how should I say, with like executables and actually like small milestones. So if you can show this when you're applying for a job, no one cares whether you did your PhD here or there, or I won't say no one cares, but it's about you. It's about whether you can show that you know your stuff and you can analyze data, look at data, set milestones, and deliver on these milestones. And that's what they need.
One thing that I would add, though, so we commented on various things being better in industry as opposed to academia, and you did mention that you have a certain amount of freedom with your research and development within Exscientia. But then again, I would say that one always has more freedom to research whatever topic interests you, of course, bearing in mind the funding within academia than it is in industry. Is that really so? Do you have enough freedom within academia, or?
Well, look, yes. So you are bound by the strategic decision making of your company. However, on my level, which is still small within the company, because above me you have directors, VPs, and all these other guys who actually make decisions based on a lot of data that I don't get to see, which is completely normal. I think that's pretty much like also in academia. You can't really, as a postdoc, you kind of have to work in the field that your PI is working, right? As you progress and as you're a PI, you get to choose your stuff. But it's also the same thing in industry. As you progress and as you become the CSO, you also get to choose whether the company will go into that direction or that direction, et cetera, et cetera. The only difference is that in industry, fortunately or unfortunately, industry is a money-making effort. So you have to, or I won't say money-making, I would say value creation effort. So you do have to create value for patients, for your stock owners, for anyone who basically is in the value creation chain. You do need to create value. In academia, you don't necessarily. You try to, but if it fails, it's okay. But in industry, you do, and that's why your playing field is a bit narrower.
Has more rules. It definitely has more rules and constrictions, I would say.
Yes, and you also do have to realize that there is a lot of, especially with when you start working in pharma, there is a lot of regulations which are put in place to protect patients and protect other types of things. So your playing field also gets narrower and narrower when it comes to what data you can use, how you can use them, et cetera, et cetera.
I love that we covered this because I really wanted to know whether academia is as far-reaching as industry. And there is an issue with this question because we might be comparing dogs and frogs. But generally, would you say that academia is as influential as industry? Is industry more important nowadays? We called academia the hubs of science for sure. But when you look at the market nowadays, I think that
look, I think these are the two sides of the same coin. You can't have one or the other. You can't have one without the other. And I strongly think this. Academic setting is where basic research is being done, where fundamental breakthroughs still happen and will always happen. Industry is more applied and more oriented to actually pushing this thing forward into patients. And we do more, how many targets have been discovered by all sorts of